How much do houses cost in Australia? This is one of the most common questions people have if they're thinking of emigrating. I'm Lisa from Australian travel and migration blog dreamingofdownunder.com, and I moved to Australia in 2015 from the UK. If you're thinking of moving to Australia permanently and you want to buy a home, it's really important to look into how much property costs in the different cities because prices really vary across Australia. If you're hoping to move to Australia permanently, the price of property is probably going to be one of your deciding factors when you're choosing where to live. I hear a lot of British expats saying that they've bought really big houses with pools in Australia for the price of a really small home in the UK. But they're very often from expensive places like London or the southeast, and they've moved to a cheaper area of Australia. For me, the price of my old 3-bedroom home in the West Midlands in the UK would only buy me a studio apartment in Sydney. So it's really important to do your research before you choose where to live in Australia. In this video, I'm going to run through the current median house prices and unit or apartment prices across the state capitals of Australia. I'll also talk through the current growth rates in each city because that's really varied at the moment, as well as the effect that the pandemic has had on property prices. I don't work in the property industry, but I used to work in investment mortgages in the UK, and I do have an interest in property, and I watch a lot of reports and stay up to date. I'll reference where my figures are coming from, and I'll link to those reports below. Okay, let's get started. Before I get into the numbers, I just want to run through some of the changes that have happened to the property market because of the pandemic. According to a report by PoorLogic, during the 12 months up until the end of January 2022, property nationally in Australia went up 22.4% in value on average. To give you an idea of how abnormal that is, the property in Sydney during that same period went up 25.5%. But the average annual growth in property in Sydney over the previous decade was only 7.8%. So we've been through a huge housing boom that's made property extremely unaffordable for a lot of people, unfortunately. Here are some of the trends that have happened during the pandemic. Number one is people tending to move out of the capital cities to live in the regional areas because they don't need to get to the office anymore. Particularly areas that are just outside of the capital cities have become very popular for people to move to, which has obviously created a lot of demand for property there. So some of the regional areas have gone up in price more than the capital cities, which is quite unusual. For example, the Central Coast, which is a lovely beach area just north of Sydney, has gone up 32% in value during the 12 months up until the end of September 2021. The second trend is people who have previously lived in a city centre for work have now moved out to lower density areas on the outskirts of the cities or near beaches. So for example, in Sydney, a lot of wealthy city workers who would have lived either in the city or in the eastern suburbs beaches, which is quite close to the city, have moved up to the northern beaches, which is a little bit further from the city and a bit lower density, and that skyrocketed the prices there. In the 12 months up until the end of September 2021, prices in the northern beaches region went up 37.2%, which is the highest growth in any local government area across the whole of Australia. The median house price went up by $618,000 during that period. The third trend is people leaving the colder, more southern states like New South Wales and Victoria to move up to Queensland, which has a warmer, more tropical climate. So areas like Brisbane and the regional areas surrounding it, like the Gold Coast and Sunshine Coast, have become really popular, and that's pushed the prices up there. During the 12 months up until the end of September 2021, prices in the Sunshine Coast, which is a lovely area just north of Brisbane, went up 30.2%. And prices in the Gold Coast, which is just south of Brisbane, went up 26.7%. Another trend is people buying bigger houses rather than apartments, which means that the gap in price between houses and apartments has widened. To show you how the property values have changed across Australia, I'm just going to run through the growth in values for each of Australia's state capitals during the pandemic. So that's from the start of April 2020 up to the end of May 2022. So during that period, Brisbane went up 40.5%, Adelaide went up 39.7%, Canberra 38.1%, Hobart 37.2%, Darwin 27.5%, Sydney 23.9%, Perth 22.9%, and Melbourne 10.5%. Just note that for the last few months, Sydney and Melbourne have been coming down in price on average, and last month Canberra came down too, so that's pulled down their averages across that period. Next, I'll run through the growth rates for each city during the last 12 months to give you more of a recent update. Brisbane went up 27.8%, Adelaide 26.1%, Canberra 18.7%, Hobart 17.3%, Sydney 10.3%, Darwin 6.4%, Melbourne 5.8%, and Perth 5.6%. Next, I'm going to run through the current median house prices across Australia from a CoreLogic monthly property report that came out at the start of June 2022. Remember that median means the middle value, so that means that half the properties in those cities will be cheaper than that value and half will be more expensive. So Sydney is the most expensive with a median house price of $1.4 million. Canberra is the next expensive with $1.1 million. Melbourne is third at $992,000. Normally Melbourne is actually the second most expensive in Australia, but Canberra has overtaken it recently. Number 4 is Brisbane at $886,000. Next is Hobart at $797,000. Then Adelaide at $688,000. Darwin at $584,000 and Perth at $583,000. Now I'll run through the same median prices but for units, which means flat. So the most expensive again is Sydney at $830,000. Second is Melbourne at $629,000. Third is Canberra at $622,000. Then Hobart at $590,000. Fifth is Brisbane at $499,000. Then it's Adelaide at $416,000. Then Perth at $411,000. And cheapest is Darwin at $370,000. To give you an idea of where the property values are heading in each city, I'm going to run through the growth or decline for each of the capital cities in Australia over the last 3 months. So that's between March and May 2022. So Adelaide had the biggest growth at 5.7%. Then it's Brisbane at 4.6%. Third is Perth at 2.7%. Darwin and Canberra are next at 2.2%. Then it's Hobart at 0.3%. Melbourne declined by 0.8% and Sydney also declined by 1.4%. Now to go through some of the predictions for property prices that I've heard in the media. So as you heard then, Sydney and Melbourne are now starting to come down in price on average. They did say in that report though that in Sydney the decline is in the upper quartile of houses, so the bigger, more expensive properties are coming down, but with the cheaper properties they are still going up in price. Something important to note about Australia, at the moment inflation is very high, it's over 5%, and prices have gone up at the fastest rate in 20 years. To counteract that, the RBA has lifted the cash rate for the first time since 2010 from 0.1% to 0.35%, and this is predicted to continue increasing. This means that interest rates will go up and a lot of people will have to pay more on their mortgage payments, which is going to decrease the amount that people can borrow, which should push house prices down. That's one of the predictions. There are still other people predicting that properties will still go up, so it's something to do some research on. I hope that was useful if you're thinking of moving to Australia or if you're just thinking of moving interstate or buying your first property. If you want to look at properties for sale, I would go on to realestate.com.au or domain.com.au. They're the big property websites in Australia. They're similar to Rightmove in the UK. Let me know in the comments if you're thinking of buying a property in Australia and how that's going. Please like and subscribe if you enjoyed this video. It really helps my channel. Thanks for watching. And prices have gone up. Prices has gone up. Blah.